And so if you've got that popped up on your screen, go ahead and hit OK. And that way we can do this for posterity. I was on a call last night doing much the same thing, and I didn't hit the record button. So now it's a do-over. So in any case, we always, I don't think we'll have any problem with anybody on this call tonight. I'm not even going to do the warning. I'll mute you and shut you off if you're not cordial. But this is about Cowboys, so I know we'll have nothing but cordiality here. So Mr. Fuller, the floor is yours. Take it away, host.
Well, thank you, Rod. And on behalf of Jim Riley and the 1776 Syndicate, thank you for having me as guest host tonight. Tonight we have a special treat. I'm Representative John Fuller. I'm the Republican candidate for Senate District 4 here in Kalispell. And we are talking in the last session and the session before. Ted Valentiner and I go way back. We're writing buddies, and he is one of the guiding forces for the efforts to have Montana join on to the National Day of the Cowboy. And Montana, we were able to do that, get that through, and the co-sponsor was Senator Ken Bogner from Miles City, which is a cowboy town if there ever was one. And so tonight, thank you, Ted, for joining us. And Ted, tell a little bit about yourself and how you got started on the National Day of the Cowboy.
All right. Thanks, John. Yeah, we've been riding buddies for a number of years, and always enjoy it when we get together. I guess let me just start with a poem. You know, every cult has poetry, and one kind of that sticks with me was by a guy they call Ranger Doug. He's part of a group called Riders in the Sky, and he said, and it basically, it's tall in the saddle. He brought out our best, and each day you'd live by the code of the West. Never cheat, never lie, keep your word to the end. A cowboy was a hero back then. Then one day he rode off and never returned. It seems we've forgotten the lessons he's learned. Now heroes are meaner and we've lost a good friend. Wish the cowboy was a hero again. Now I memorized that segment of that song and that poem because I guess a little bit of background. I was fortunate enough to grow up in the 50s and the 60s when we had cowboy heroes that had a code of honor, and I passed those. I have these cards out with the Cowboy Hall of Fame Code of Honor, and you know, you learn to do the right thing. And these were some of my earliest influences: the Roy Rogers and the Gene Autry's and the Hopalongs and the Cisco Kids. And so that was kind of instilled in me from a young age. Then my family moved to Colorado when I was 10 or 11. We had, I was the new kid in school, and there was another new kid at the same time that had a horse, and we hit it off really well. And ask me to this day, I don't know why, but every once in a while this horse would buck us off, and we even got more, I guess, more interested in that. And then from there, I graduated to rodeo, and I had cousins and uncles that were ranchers, and I went to work for them. And so that cowboy culture was kind of I don't know if you'd say indoctrinated, but it was infused into me at an early age. Well, I went on through Little Britches Rodeo, which is like Little League, high school rodeo, college rodeo. And then I went to work on a ranch in South Dakota, went overseas for many, many years, but I always kept my hand in with my Western roots, training horses and doing some of those kind of things. Well, I came back to Montana, and I became aware of an organization called the National Day of the Cowboy. And I thought, well, that sounds kind of interesting. So I started to do a little bit of research. And the ultimate goal of the National Day of the Cowboy was to get the federal Congress to approve a National Day of the Cowboy. In order to do that, the target right now is to get 34 states to get on board. Well, I looked down the list, and lo and behold, there was no Montana on the states that had approved the National Day of the Cowboy. And I think I started this effort in about 2015, and I thought, Montana has as much cowboy heritage as any place on the face of the earth. Why aren't we on board with the National Day of the Cowboy? So I started contacting legislators here in Montana, and I got no response. I sent emails, I made phone calls, no response for about a couple years. And then my local representative, state representative, he said, well, I might consider it, but I need to go to talk to the tribes, and I need to see if this is acceptable to them and all that stuff. And so I kept going and I kept going, trying to get a legislator. And then someone said, there's a Marine veteran in Miles City in Miles City, many people consider that to be the cowboy capital of Montana. So I thought, boy, what a perfect match. So I called Ken up and I said, Ken, I would really like to get this into the legislature. And he said he was running for Senate at the time. And he said, if I get elected, I'll see what we can do. I'll wait to see what we can get done. Fortunately, Ken was elected. He got to the legislature and he found a co-sponsor who I shall ever be forever grateful to, and John Fuller. And they co-sponsored SJ10, the National Day of the Cowboy. And basically I'm just going to read you the first few lines that'll make a little bit of sense later on. This was SJ10. Whereas Montana pioneering men and women known as cowboys helped establish America's frontier, and the cowboy archetype transcends gender, generations, ethnicity, geographic boundaries, and political affiliations. And it goes on from there. And so we started, and I was just looking at the paperwork today. We started with that legislation. After the 2 years, I was trying to get signatures. The draft was received in December of 2018. And I made numerous trips down to Helena to talk to John and to talk to Kenneth, to testify at different committee meetings over and over again. And we got just about all the way there. We got it passed third reading in the Senate. And then we got it into the third reading in the House, and it was rejected. So we came so close, and it was rejected. And we were told that it was rejected because it didn't specifically address women. And which seemed like a minor detail because the first sentence says pioneering men and women. Anyway, it so happened after all that work to get shot down on the final vote was pretty discouraging. So it so happened that the Professional Bull Riders, which is a multinational, multi-million-dollar organization, was having their annual bull riding event in Billings. The CEO of that organization is a gentleman named Sean Gleason. And Sean went on during that event. He went live, that's broadcast around the world, with Senator Teresa Manzella. And he said, you know what? He'd heard that it got voted down. And he said, you know what? You people in Montana should be ashamed. He said, I've been bringing my professional bull rider event to Billings every year for 24 years. We probably have one of the most successful events that Billings ever hosted. And I'm at the point right now with your conduct that I'm considering not bringing it back to Montana. And he had invited me to be with, unfortunately, it was at my mother's funeral, so I wasn't there. But Teresa went back, worked with the legislators. I made some calls to some people that I know as well. And John, I don't know all the correct terminology for how we had to go through it, but what we basically had to do was we had to go back through the House, get 3 readings in the House, get those all approved. We had to go back to the Senate, get 3 Senate readings, get those all approved. And because there was an amendment to the language of the bill, taking out 2 things, 1531 and films. The objections came because the native members of the legislature objected to 1531 because that's when the Spanish arrived with their horses in the New World. and they felt that films were an unfair representation. So we got that issue settled. And finally, on the last day of the session, after starting in 2018, on the last day of the session, it was approved by a vote of 43-7 on April 25th of 2019. So now the fourth Saturday of July every year in Montana is officially the National Day of the Cowboy. We have a number of events here. That's Heritage Days in Columbia Falls. They have a rodeo there. One of my favorite events is the Northern Rodeo Association Rodeo in Eureka, where they have the National Day of the Cowboy flag displayed, and they play John Wayne's America, Why I Love Her, while they run the bucket horses around the arena, which is quite always a moving event. But you know, without people, and it surprised me to have so much difficulty in Montana. I've lived all over the world. I spent 37 years living different places around the world. Everywhere you go, one of the first things people say when you're an American, oh, a cowboy. I've been to rodeos in France. They have cowboy roping clubs in the UK. They have cowboy festivals in Italy. A good friend of mine, Wiley Gustafson, and his band, Wiley and the Wild West, play all over the world. And so the cowboy is such an icon, an American icon. I was surprised to have so much difficulty here in Montana. But I guess it kind of reflects the way things have changed. And I still think it's an important icon. It's an important message, that conduct and that culture. I believe strongly in it. I'm a board member for the Montana Cowboy Hall of Fame. We have a very active organization. We have an induction every year recognizing Montanans, both including all aspects of Montana population, inducting them into the Hall of Fame, recognizing their contributions, both living and legacy contributions to our Western culture. It's always important to me. It's important to many people. And I appreciate those members or those citizens that still recognize that importance. So that was kind of a long drawn out explanation. You're muted, John.
Yeah, thank you, Ted. Okay.
There you go.
Ted, what you just illustrated was the fact that both good and bad aspects of the fact of just how difficult it is to get anything passed through the legislature. And of course, that is by design. Yep. But in today's politically correct world, you point out the fact that what changes had to be made in what we would assume with common sense. And of course, both Ted and I have been undergoing counseling for our excess of common sense.
Exactly.
Easy for people to accept and agree with. But the University of Wyoming had a recruiting advertisement. You remember anything about that, Ted? What was that about? You remember what that was?
Yeah. Well, I remember that there was a significant effort to Wyoming is known as the Cowboy State, and Wyoming was also the first state to recognize the National Day of the Cowboy. But when they were recruiting, there was a significant effort, I guess, behind the scenes effort to, basically remove references to the cowboy.
Exactly.
And,
exactly. In Wyoming, yep. The Wyoming University of Wyoming are the Cowboys. And of course, when they said what Wyoming needs is more cowboys, the woke population throughout the country came out in force and attempting to change. And of course, as Ted has illustrated, what would the National Day of the Cowboy and the Cowboy Hall of Fame are trying to do is represent and preserve the Western culture of the cowboy in all of its good and honorable aspects. And do you have the Code of the Cowboy with you, Ted? I
don't know that. Let me just check and see if I've got one with me. I I hand them out every chance I get, but let me just see if I've got one with me now. I may not have, but
Oh, boy.
I'll just second here. Hang on. I keep passing them out, and
We're going to have to lynch you if you don't.
yeah, it doesn't look like I do, John. I
Okay.
passed some out the other day. I don't think I do, but you know, uh, when I was discussing earlier in my childhood, you know, Roy Rogers and Gene Autry had something similar. Basically, it says that you're firm but fair. You treat people with respect. You keep your word. You know, it's basically the things that we would expect from an honorable person, that we would expect an honorable person to do. And I see so many things nowadays that people scoff at, when to me, those are kind of core principles that I grew up with. And the code of the code of the West and the Cowboy Code, Jim had one, and he was reading it when we first discussed. And I think it's just once again, there's that problem word, common sense way of dealing with people so that you have mutual respect. And I pull this out of, when I have one, I pull one out of my wallet every so often, and I look at it and I think, where have we gotten so sidetracked that these kind of principles are almost openly mocked nowadays?
Yeah, okay. Yes, Ted. Another thing that your struggle to get the bill passed shows a couple of things that the 1776 syndicate needs to remember. The first is the fact that the legislature is subject to enormous pressures from all sides. And the old adage, a squeaky wheel gets the grease. Okay, even though you would think that something as innocuous as Montana recognizing its cowboy culture and its cowboy heritage and its cowboy past was a difficult struggle for Ted and his allies to achieve. And it was difficult because there are forces out there that are determined to destroy at the worst possible way, or at least ignore those things that made Montana Montana. And Ted, kudos to you for all your hard work and your efforts to carry this out, get this achieved. Do you have some examples of some of the Cowboy Hall of Fame here in Montana?
Yeah, we in fact, we're in the process of voting right now. One of the first that I remember, and in fact, the Montana Cowboy Hall of Fame has given a space in the Charlie Russell Museum in Great Falls. And so if anyone visits the Charlie Russell, I hope that you'll visit our exhibit there. We have 4 or 5 of the early and some of the most prominent early inductees into the Cowboy Hall of Fame. And one of those that I remember quite clearly as a name, he went by the name of Bally Ball. He was a Native American. He was a hard worker. He was very well known in his community for helping other people out. But his father said, you know, you're going to have a hard time here because of some of the innate prejudices. So his father sent him somewhere else. I believe it was here in Montana. And he made such a reputation for himself as an all-around competent cowboy that he was one of the first inductees. And his family was at the induction ceremony, which I was quite honored to attend. And the Cowboy Hall of Fame acknowledges not only the cowboy culture, but our native culture as well, because in many cases, they're very much intertwined. The Indian National Finals Rodeo in Las Vegas has some of the finest competitors you'll ever see. We have competitors from here in Montana that always compete. We have one of the pickup men at the Indian National Finals Rodeo that's from Montana. And I don't know if many of your listeners are familiar with pickup men, but they're probably one of the most critical elements in a rodeo to get you off your bucking horse and get you away safely. And we have a young man from Browning who is one of the best in the business. He races with us during ski joring here in Whitefish in the winter, but he picks up occasionally, I think, for Bryce Rodeo, but he also picks up for the Indian National Finals Rodeo. And I'm hoping that one of these days we'll induct Pete into the Hall of Fame as well. But we have so many different contributors to the Montana Hall of Fame or the Montana cowboy culture. We have a ballot. My wife is a trustee and she has a ballot right now to vote on. And she was commenting on the difficulty of making a choice between the candidates. We have 12 districts in Montana. We're in District 10, Sanders Lake, Lincoln, and Flathead County. And she was commenting on the difficulty of choosing between the candidates. We have living candidates, and then we have legacy candidates, and they're nominated by their trustees from their district. And each induction ceremony that we have in February, we read off their biography, and some of these are so impressive. Just as a quick aside, my wife is from New Zealand, and the last induction, we inducted a cowboy from New Zealand who lives here in Montana. And it was really a treat for my wife to get together and talk to him about New Zealand and the cowboy and the ranching community in New Zealand. But we have ranchers, we have Native Americans, we have one of the inductees last year was the gentleman Gill that runs the Museum of America down towards Polson. And then the year before, last year, I was honored to induct a couple of good friends of mine, Bill and Gail Workman, who have carried on a family legacy of packing for the Forest Service in the Bob Marshall Wilderness. I think Gail and Bill together have accumulated about 43 or 44 years packing in the Bob, and Bill's dad and Bill's grandfather packed before them. So those are the kind of traditions that we get to honor here in Montana with the Cowboy Hall of Fame. And many times it's a tough choice on who you finally vote for on the ballot, but it's nice to see that kind of contributions, both pioneering and more contemporary, to see those kind of contributions that they've made to our state and to our culture.
Okay. By the way, I'm trusting that there's nobody in the 1776 syndicate that has never been to a rodeo. But for those of you who have never been, when you go to the rodeo, make sure you pay attention. The best horsemen you could possibly want to watch and try to learn are the pickup men and women. But to rescue the bull riders and the saddle bronc and the bareback riders from their stock, the horsemanship that is necessary for them to do their job and safeguard both the animals and the riders is incredible. So I urge you to pay close attention. In some ways, and sometimes when I go to the rodeo, I see a particularly good pickup man, and I watch them more than anything else because they're so good. Ted, can you tell a little bit about the relationship of the current Lieutenant Governor of the state of Montana to the Cowboy Hall of Fame?
I can indeed. A number of years ago, I was at a Cowboy Poetry Festival, and I met a gentleman named Wiley Gustafson. Wiley has since become a very good friend. He's come from he was raised on a ranch over on the Two Medicine River over in Browning, and Wiley's accomplished family includes other veterinarians, but it also includes our current Lieutenant Governor, Kristen Juris. And as a matter of fact, last weekend we were in Great Falls for what they call the Saddle of Honor ceremony. The Saddle of Honor is given to distinguished contributors to Montana cowboy culture. There's only been 3 given out. Last weekend, the Saddle of Honor was given to a gentleman named Wally Badgett. If you're familiar, he's a rodeo coach here in Montana, but he's been a professional rodeo cowboy. He's also a well-known cartoonist, and if you've ever seen his Western cartoons, he features a character called Earl, and Earl is a rancher and a cowboy, and Earl has all these terrible things happen to him. But while he was getting the award was presented by Kristen Juris, our current lieutenant governor. And one of the first things she said was, I'm always a cowgirl at heart, and everything I do, that's where I started from. And those are the things that are important to me. And that's kind of really rewarding to see that kind of commitment and that kind of honor from somebody like Kristen, because she's been on the ground, she's stacked the bales, she's been bucked off the horses, so she knows what it's all about. Can't hear you, John.
There we go. Yeah, I keep muting myself because, okay, Ted, the 1776 syndicate, I think one of the things that they have to make sure we remember and go into detail again of the process by which you went through just to deal with legislators and committees and all of the things, just to get one little resolution through a state legislature who you would think would just rubber stamp such a thing.
Yeah. Okay. What happened to start with, as I mentioned earlier, I had such a difficult time finding a legislator that would sign on and agree to support the legislation. It was at this point, when I started my efforts, there were 12 or 13 states that had already formally approved a National Day of the Cowboy. Some of them, if I remember, East Coast states that I had no idea would have any interest in cowboy culture. So it took me almost 2 years until I was given the contact details for at that time, Kenneth Bogner, before he was senator, and he said we would get it done if he got elected. Fortunately, he was, and even more fortunately, John, you stepped up and got on board with him. But I made numerous trips to Helena from Whitefish. I attended committee hearings. I spoke at many of these hearings. I spoke to many legislators. And just as quick an aside, the first time I walked into the Capitol building in Helena, I was absolutely astonished by all the, what do you call them, lobbyists there. It was like, that was like NASCAR. Everybody had badges on, and I thought, here we are, this is just Montana, little Montana, but there was not an organization that wasn't represented in those hallways. And so, it was kind of bumping elbows trying to get in and out of these different hearings just because there were so many legislators there. And I testified, I don't know how many times it was, on different committees, and I talked to different legislators. I was back and forth, and they would talk about modifications. And the national director for the National Day of the Cowboy, she came in, and we went to some more hearings, and we were talking to legislators. Some were quite interested, and some were totally indifferent. And we went time and time again. They asked us why. I would explain what it was about, what we intended to honor, why we had such a, I don't know if you want to say entitlement to such a recognition in Montana. But it always seemed like I almost felt like there was a lot of nitpicking. Well, what about this word, or what about that? And it just seemed that we were kind of losing the plot. We wanted to honor an American icon. And whether you said in the National Day of the whatever, the Day of the Cowboy, if you want to consider, some of the finest cowboys I know are women. And that's the opening statement of the joint resolution and the National Day of the Cowboy legislation. But that's one of the first things that was picked up. Well, it doesn't say cowgirl, so I don't think I can support it. And I thought, why, if something that should be kind of a slam dunk, why are we playing these kind of games? You people have a Montana heritage. You should have some pride. We're recognized all over the world for the cowboy. and one of the most cowboy states in the whole country, and I'm pushing a rope uphill. And it will never fail to surprise me how difficult it was. But at the end of the day, it was so rewarding. The final vote, and I have a list, I don't have it in front of me, of the people that voted against it. The final vote on the third reading was 43-7. So there were 7 people, no matter what, they weren't going to vote for us. And some of the most, in my view, some of the most rewarding votes that were cast for supporting the legislation came from our Native American community. I had a number of the legislators come up to me and say, you know what? My family have been cowboys my entire life. They're some of the best. And I think we need to recognize them. And that was very, very rewarding to me, because there was always elements, that one of the first legislators I talked to, it was immediately identity politics. And I thought, this is not about identity. It's honoring a heritage and a culture and an icon. And so, that kind of got me off to a little bit of a frustrating start. But, the Native American vote was one of the most satisfying to see that they supported it, because they recognized some of the best cowboys I know are women, and the Native Americans are second to none when it comes to cowboy skills. And all the convincing that it took to get that word across was quite a struggle.
Yeah, Ted, and of course, one of the most popular things at the Northwest Montana County Fair is the Indian relay races. They're one of the most popular events. I see that Rod has his hand up here. Rod, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, John. Ted, I want to thank you for your efforts in getting this done. I had worked on a ranch as a young man, and I will say that most of the life lessons, the most important life lessons I've learned and carried with me throughout my life, were learned during that period. From bucking hay to repairing fence to branding. And so the first thing I want to do is thank you. The second thing I want to do is make mention of the person who ran the ranch. It was a big operation: horses, cattle, farming, the whole works. And the person who did all the books for that was the matriarch. Her husband had died, gotten killed literally on the ranch, and her son took it over. So it was a third generation ranch. And the matriarch was, the business that goes into running a ranch, it's incredible. Cowboy is just not the cowboy way. It's also the American capitalistic way.
It is indeed.
Yeah. So, that envelops not only women, but the family, because ranching is a family business. Being a cowboy is being a family man to me also.
Very much so.
And so that brings me to my next point. And this may be off topic, but I'm hoping that between you and Mr. Fuller, you can reel it in for me, because we know that there's a shrinking factor going on with Montana lands. And I believe it's American Prairie Reserve, big conglomerates coming in to buy up large tracts of land and lock ranchers out of what they do and lock regular people out of access to those properties. So do you know anything about that? And is this something that is in the wheelhouse of, the whole cowboy movement, or is it just something we need to be aware of and watchful?
Oh man, you couldn't have asked a better question. Do you mind, John? You want me to go ahead and make?
I'd be happy to jump on that bandwagon. That
I know that one. I've been involved in this one as well. So we're gonna nail this one.
Yeah. The first thing is I want to let everybody know about an author by the name of Dave Skinner, who lives here in Kalispell. And he writes for Range Magazine, RANGE, Range Magazine. And it was there you go, Range Magazine. It was he who first put out the expose, if you will, of what the American Prairie Reserve was trying to do. And what these guys are doing. Now, don't get me wrong, the history of the American West, as old as the American West is, corporations and big money from the East have bought large tracts of lands and large ranches and run them for, you know, on a kind of commercial basis. And the cowboys rode for the brand. Okay. And it was considered, and I just read an article today where the famous 4 Sixes Ranch down in Texas, in Guthrie, Texas, which has been around since 1870, one of the largest ranches ever in America, was just purchased by a consortium for some $200 million. Okay, so that is as old as the American West, that policy. However, what's different about the American Prairie Reserve is that large money people are coming in, and what they want to do is they want to end the day of the cowboy. And Dave Skinner, in his articles and his expose that go back, and you can look in the archives of the magazine, helped start a movement called Save the Cowboy. Because what the American Prairie Reserve wants to do is they come in and they buy these ranches, and they want to set up free-ranging buffalo or bison, free-ranging bison to use federal lands. But one of the things that a lot of people have to remember is that a lot of ranches throughout the Rocky Mountain West are permit ranches. And that means that they buy cow-calf permits and use those permits on BLM land, mostly Bureau of Land Management land, but some national forest land as well. And the result is that the deeded land that ranchers own oftentimes is not large enough to raise a profitable crop of cattle. And you know, remember here in the arid Rocky Mountain West, sometimes as many as 50 acres per cow-calf unit is needed in order to support that cow-calf unit. Well, the American Prairie Reserve wants to move America or this area of Montana back to the 1820s and 30s, because what they're doing is they've been buying land, and they are then they make these ranchers an offer they can't reserve, and it could be another program in itself, and discuss why ranchers are unable to pass on their land, and why the number of family ranches being passed on from generation to generation is declining so precipitously. And it's not just that young people don't want to work on a farm or a ranch. There are other many forces at work here. But regardless, and I just saw where the American Prairie Reserve has gotten the Biden administration Secretary of the Interior, whose name I have conveniently forgot and hope I never remember, that they've been granted the right to free range their bison on Bureau of Land Management land. And what, of course, that may mean is, in a state where there are 4 times as many cattle as there are people, that if bison who carry brucellosis ever get into a herd of cattle, that cattle herd has to be destroyed. And cattle ranchers here in Montana are logically and reasonably concerned that the American Prairie Reserve will destroy the cattle industry in Montana, and therefore not only destroy a way of life, but destroy a major food supply for the world. And of course, that is not concerned the American Prairie Reserve. They say that what they want to do is that there will be tourists. I'm sorry, tourists are not going to come to the land east of Lewistown and drive around and look at a few buffalo. or bison at long range. And they're just not going to do it. Okay. And so, but anyway, the forces that are trying to destroy the cowboy way, the ranches of central and eastern Montana, they're very powerful. They're well funded, oftentimes by billionaires from other foreign countries. And so Ted's work here in helping Montana recognize the Day of the Cowboy is crucial. And we need all of the members of the 1776 syndicate to be prepared, not just to defend the cowboy way or the Day of the Cowboy or the cowboy culture, but the American way and the American culture, because I'm sorry, wealthy Europeans coming in and flying a helicopter into the American Prairie Reserve, so looking at a few bison, that is not the American West.
Can I step in here, John?
Absolutely.
The ultimate goal of the American Prairie Reserve is 3.5 million acres and 10,000 bison. 3.5 million acres is about 5,000 square miles, to put the perspective. One of the problems is if you were a rancher, you're on a third or fourth generation rancher, and your neighbor is going to retire, his kids don't want to ranch anymore, you would like to buy some additional deeded land to run your cows on, you're competing with, as John mentioned earlier, international organizations that have tax exempt status. They're using their NGO and their nonprofit status to outbid the neighbors that would like to have that land. Why is Hans Georg Wyss, the Wyss Foundation in Switzerland, why is he contributing money to the American Prairie Reserve? Why is the Mars family contributing tens of millions of dollars? I used to be a big fan of M&Ms, no more. M&Ms is Mars candy. Mars is one of the biggest funding organizations for the American Prairie Reserve. Now, just recently, as John pointed out, the BLM director authorized bison grazing on BLM lands. That's a direct violation of the Taylor Grazing Act. The Taylor Grazing Act was implemented as one element of protecting the American food supply. Also, when you lease land from the BLM, it's for a certain number of animal units per month, and it's not year round. The Montana Attorney General, Austin Knudsen, from a ranching family, has filed a request for an appeal to the recent BLM ruling that said you can go ahead and graze your bison, regardless of the fact that they're not domestic livestock. The Taylor Grazing Act was limited to domestic livestock. Bison certainly are not. As you pointed, I don't know if any of you have ever been around bison, but a 3-strand or 4-strand barbed wire fence is not going to stop bison. You're going to have bison breeding the rancher's cows. You're going to have bison spreading brucellosis, as John mentioned. Brucellosis is a highly contagious disease. Brucellosis results in low birth weight or stillborn calves, and it reduces the fertility of your herd immensely. So you have bison breeding your cows and spreading disease, walking through the fences, and furthermore, the latest American Prairie Reserve statement was that they wanted to remove 38 miles of internal fences. Okay, some of those fences are on BLM allotments where they pay per head per month to graze cattle. Well, in someday in the future, what if the APR goes belly up? Who's going to replace all those fences around the federal allotments? You know, who's going to restore that land to, like some of the best stewards, the ranchers today that operate it? There's so many unanswered questions, and I found it particularly interesting that they have 7 yurts. Yurts, kind of I guess you would call it it's not exactly a Montana outfitting tent, wall tent, but they have these yurts that the American Prairie Reserve rents out $2,500 a night per person. They have 7 of them. So you can fly into your helicopter, go out to your yurt, and you'll have a 5-star Michelin rated chef to serve you. Now, we have bison, National Bison Refuge just down the road from us, south of Kalispell. We have the herds along the highway in the Blackfoot Nation. You could drive along Highway 2 and see them. We have immense herds over in Fort Peck. So why do these folks have to come in here and say they need to see the bison in the American Prairie Reserve? And we currently have about 450,000 in deeded land and allotments in the American Prairie Reserve, and somewhere between 800 and 1,000 bison. Now, if you can tell me that you're going to be able to drive into your yurt and see bison, a herd of 800 bison somewhere in 50,000 or 450,000 acres, then you're a better man than I am. But that's just the kind of foolishness. They have another campground where it's $10 or $15 a night. But who's going to want to come out and camp in the middle of the American or the Montana prairie in the middle of the summer on the off chance that bison may want to wander by? You know, and when you have that's an important food source. All the protein raised on that acreage is an important food source that's being taken out of production. That when you buy up those ranches and those families leave, there's a huge impact on the local communities. You put your equipment dealer out of business, you put your grocers out of business, you put everybody out of business just so the elite can fly in and off chance that they might see a bison. And with this tax exempt and special treatment tax money, the local folks are having a hard time competing with that. A couple of other quick comments. That Range magazine that John was referring to, if you can go to the Range magazine archive, it's the fall 2019 issue. I have copies I've passed out to friends, but Dave Skinner has done a masterful job on this article, telling you really what the story is about the Range magazine. And another organization I'd like you to consider joining and taking a look at is the United Property Owners of Montana. They are doing their best to see if they can push back against this American Prairie Reserve. And I think that if we truly care about Montana and the cowboy culture and Montana in general, they're a worthwhile organization to get involved with. Thanks, John.
Okay, thanks, Ted. I don't see any hands up. Are there any questions of anybody? So I will go on and talk a little bit about trying to summarize. Oh, go ahead, Rod. Go ahead.
Thanks, John, and thanks, Ted. You covered that very well. You gave me a real good glimpse of what the issue is there. And I had an idea, but I wanted to hear it from the experts. The one comment I wanted to make before I kick out of here is rodeo clowns. You know, you talked about pickup men. And I spent some time in around rodeos in the back end. And I like to say, the first time I got in a tank was the last time I was on a horse. So going into the military and getting into armor, it kind of changed my focus. But it was the rodeo clowns, and I knew one, and they were absolutely phenomenal, athletic, brilliant. I mean, they understood animals. They were also, that's part of the cowboy culture too. But they understood animals. They were brave, daring. It was like parkour. These people are pretty phenomenal. So for any rodeo clowns out there listening in the future too, my hat's off to all of them. And I do want to mention before you wrap up, John, that next week we have on the show Carrie Seekings Crow, who you probably know from the Montana House of Representatives, District 43. And we wanted to interview more people from that side of the state, the eastern part of the state where I come from, and get some good information from her next week. So I wanted to throw that out there. And then I'll leave the rest up to you. And again, Ted, thank you so much for what you did, what you're doing. And we will keep passing that torch on. Thank you.
Thank you, Rod. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Okay. And for the benefit of our listeners and those who are listening to the recorded version of this, let me summarize a couple of things. The first, the old saying, there's an adage. You might not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in you. And so one of the reasons why these agencies and these elitists are so successful is because they get involved in the political process. The common person needs to get involved in the political process. Whereas Ted has illustrated, one person actively involved can make a difference. But it takes dedication, it takes time, and it also, of course, means that you might have to use some resources that you could otherwise spend on buying a new lever action 4570 or something.
Exactly.
Additionally, is that any act, there are enormously powerful and wealthy forces at work that are determined to destroy or at least change, maybe destroy is a little bit strong word, but at least change the long-held Montana values and the values that this nation was founded upon. They, of course, the adage that, how many times have you seen the word, it's new? And of course, if it's new, the implication is that it's automatically better. Well, no, it's not. It isn't always that way. And so here in Montana, we are faced with those who are challenging the values of Montana, who want to turn it into a left coast or right coast state. And remember also that in the political process in Montana, Montana is a cheap buy for these forces. The amount of money that it takes for a politician or a group to develop a propaganda campaign, they can do a week buy on all of the majors. They can saturate all of the major media buys in Montana for a week for one 60-second commercial in New York City. That's the price, okay? And so you're going to see, remember that in the last race for US Senate between Steve Bullock and Steve Daines, that was a $250 million campaign race. And there's only 1 million people in Montana. Secondly, is that the forces that are arrayed, that have the money and trying to change Montana, we are being deluged, if you will, by refugees from COVID or refugees from other states. And so the first thing I asked for someone that came, when that came from one of the purple states or blue states that come to, I say, welcome to America. And are you a missionary or are you a refugee? If you're a refugee, we welcome you. But if you're a missionary, I'm sorry, Montana has values we think worth protecting and preserving. So I consider the values of Montana synonymous with the values of what America was founded upon. And so I urge those of you in the 1776 Syndicate, be prepared, get motivated, put on your big boy pants and big girl pants, and get out there, get into the fray, and be prepared, because if it's worth preserving, it's going to take effort. And so I thank all of you for coming tonight.
May I make just one
sure.
quick comment, John? One of the things I think the listeners need to be aware of is the impact of an NGO or a non-governmental organization. You know, if you're watching the news and reading the newspapers, you'll see that a number of bills, a great deal of legislation that was passed last session has been overturned or had injunctions issued against it. I've pulled a number of those lawsuits and I've looked at the plaintiffs. Look at the plaintiffs and look at the money behind them. Those plaintiffs are all being funded by out-of-state non-governmental organizations. You go to somewhere like influencewatch.org, look up the plaintiffs that are filing the lawsuits and getting this legislation overturned, and look where their money comes from. It's all outside of Montana. So we need to be aware of that outside money and the influence that it has on changing Montana culture. Thanks, John.
You're welcome. And for those of you who have tuned in or listened and watched this later, thank you so much for joining us. We want to be respectful of your time. We're getting up against the time limit, and I'm going to turn it back to Rod to close out. And Carrie Seekins Crow, what is the subject of her interview they're having with her?
The subject is getting out of your lane and getting things done. She's been told by some people that she's not in her lane. So I like people who get out of their lane. So figured she would be a good one.
In the words of the Cowboys of Montana, she's a good hand.
There you go. There you go.
You got it. That's it.
Yes, exactly. Ted, again, I thank you. Mr. Fuller, thank you for stepping up and being our guest host. It was a pleasure. It always is. Those of you still online, I'm going to stop the recording here in just a minute, but I did put United Property Owners of Montana in influencewatch.org and Dave Skinner Range Magazine in the chat. So if you want to do a screenshot of that real quick, just as a reminder, go ahead and do that before we close out. Again, Ted, an absolute pleasure. And we look forward to carrying the torch forward.
Awesome.
Thank you all for
very
joining
much
us.
for the opportunity.
Thank you. We'll do it again.
Thanks.
You bet. Glad to do it.